Hello?
Hello.
Aloha. If I may, I would like to take a couple quick breaths.
Yeah, hit it up. Do your deep breathing exercises.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not used to talking in front of thousands of people, so I do get a little stage fright.
Thousands? How many?
Yeah, there's thousands watching, but anywho, I don't know if you guys can hear this. I would recommend you watch Vaush's stream. I'm streaming too, by the way, just a heads up. So I would like to begin with a quote, if that is okay.
Sure.
All right, it's by a man you like. His name is Karl Marx. Quote, "Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing today. Given and transmitted from the past, the tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. And just as they seem to be occupied with revolutionizing themselves and things, creating something that did not exist before, precisely in such epochs of revolutionary crisis, they anxiously conjure up the spirits of the past to their service, borrowing from them names, battle slogans, and costumes in order to present this new scene in world history in time-honored disguise and borrowed language. Thus, Luther put on the mask of the Apostle Paul. The revolution of 1789 to 1814 draped itself alternatively in the guise of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. And the revolution of 1848 drew nothing better than to parody. Now 1789, now the revolution tradition of 1793 to 1795. In like manner, the beginner who has learned a new language always translates it back to its mother's tongue. But he assimilates the spirit of the new language and expresses himself freely in it only when he moves in it without recalling the old and when he forgets his native tongue." So I probably didn't need to read that whole quote, but the general gist of what I'm trying to get at is that nations, revolutions, and countries are basically products of their environment, more or less, and they are a byproduct of their conditions. Would you say that is a reasonable assessment? That
You're asking me if I'm a dialectic materialist, and my answer is going to be yes, of course.
Wonderful, and I'm glad we agree dialectically. All right, so when I look at the French Revolution, for example, what are your thoughts on the French Revolution? Just curious.
Before we get started on this, I'm sorry, I'm going to need to be a little bold and ask you what arguments you would like to make with me and what disagreements you would like to suss out, you know? Just so I know before we get too involved.
Well, for the purpose of this discussion, there are two contingencies, at least two major contingencies among others, that I would like to outline. The first one is your position on economics, or at least in your advocacy of market socialism, and the second in the way that you basically talk about socialism in practice and people that advocate for socialism in practice, and how it is in general counterproductive to treat these people the way that you do, and how, you know, it would be better if you, well, didn't do that.
Okay. In that case, which of the two do you want to go over first? Do you want to go over the economic positions, or do you want to go over my relationship to what you would call existing socialism and I would call a Frankenstein pathetic amalgam of socialist ideals crammed into a state capitalist nation? Which would you prefer to hit first?
Well, yeah, I'd like to start with that. Frankenstein's monster, so to speak, as you called it. So why don't you go ahead and outline your position on, let's say, the Soviet Union? They're a pretty gold example of what many consider socialism in practice to look like, no?
I'm sure that many of them do, like CIA agents, maybe. No, the Soviet Union wasn't socialist by any definition. It wasn't democratic. Democracy is necessary under socialism. Additionally, workers did not have meaningful control over the places in which they worked. The ways in which they worked and their quotas were usually determined by state bureaucracies operated by party officials, which essentially made up the upper class of the Soviet Union. Additionally, with regards to decommodification, I guess you could say that there were elements of the Soviet Union that were heavily decommodified, and I guess that's a step, but it came at a pretty significant cost because the Soviet way of life was quite austere, compared to the U.S. way of life at that time. And there was an operating black market within the Soviet Union. There were still currencies used, goods and resources exchanged, so they were not entirely free from the pull of market forces. That's my general opinion. Also, Stalin was a tyrant of whom nothing good can be said.
Well, there are a lot of different directions I can go with everything that you said, but I will start by saying that the Soviet Union isn't solely defined by the Stalin administration. But anyways, what I will say is that in a situation of civil war, embargo, famine, internal sabotage, external sabotage, being invaded by 14 countries, you have enemies from within and without. And you end up in a situation where you have a successful revolution that, in order to hold this together, you effectively need to make necessary compromises in terms of at least internal debate, so that you end up in a situation where you need lockstep, basically lockstep for siege, to prepare for siege. So a democratic process with checks and balances in such a situation could never develop organically. I mean, imagine
you
if
could excuse
the United
anything
States,
like this, though. I mean, you could excuse anything. Even Nazi Germany convinced itself and its population that the atrocities committed during wartime were just necessary steps towards a future where all the Aryan people would live together in peace with the Lebensraum they dreamed of.
But look at the difference. Look at the difference at which they were struggling for. The Nazis were struggling for some vague idealist notion of the Aryan race, and the Bolsheviks were struggling for a society free of class.
I don't believe they were doing that.
I mean, as a consequentialist, surely understand that sometimes you have to make necessary compromises in order to realize the long-term goals of the movements.
Then they failed.
And
they made their society inequitable, unequal. They magnified and reified class structures. They never achieved any of the principal tenets of socialism, and in the meantime, they killed many people.
Wait. So, four things. So, class society.
We're going to need to focus on this point by point. So, hold on. I'm not going to lie. I'm not really interested in running down all the point by points with you. So the Soviet Union was undeniably not a socialist country.
Look, dude, you're the one bringing up a bunch of points. I just want to narrow it down one at a time so that we can talk about. The problem is, we
could do this about the Soviet Union, we could do this about China, we could do this about Vietnam. At the end of the day, your excuse is all-encompassing. They had to do it because American imperialism and foreign threats and domestic threats made it so that all of these compromises were necessary for them to succeed, except they never did succeed. At the end of the day, none of them succeeded, so it was all a wasted effort, in fact.
The French revolutionaries never succeeded, and yet look at where we are today, here in a world full of capitalism.
Because the French revolutionaries did not have a state that existed for 60 years as the antithesis of every ideal they promised. It would be like if the French revolutionaries were Napoleon. Not that Napoleon took power after, but that they were Napoleon. And all the time, all the Napoleon worshippers were like, yeah, dude, this is the French Enlightenment. Yeah, just a couple more decades of totalitarian imperial rule from Bonaparte, and then we'll have it. That would be the equivalent gesture here.
I would say, one thing I would like to say is that I don't necessarily believe that a democratic component is needed in order to classify a country as socialist.
Marx would have, by the way. Freedom was the first and foremost the thing that he advocated for in his writings.
I actually have, I can pull up literature from Capital Volume 3. I wish I had more time to prepare.
I don't actually care that much about theory. I would rather argue like principally with this.
You don't care about theory, but you care about Marx's word. And
I think you care about Marx's word. But Marx does care about freedom. That's the main thing that he cares about. How can a society be authoritarian in socialism when socialism is democratic means control over the means of production? It's completely antithetical.
Socialism is social ownership of the means of production. To get to a point to where you have people as direct worker owners requires a great deal of societal evolution and advancements that the Bolsheviks simply could not reach. They were an agrarian peasant society where you had small-scale production, petty bourgeois mindsets, and small-scale production reproduces capitalist economic relations.
Excuse. So
how is this an excuse?
Was Napoleon because this conversation is just going to be.
Let me finish my point, dude.
Because
seriously,
by your definition, Napoleon Bonaparte was a socialist.
No.
Yes, it was.
How did you even reach that far? What the fuck are you talking
So
about?
if you don't need democracy and all you need is social control of the means of production, in the case of the Soviet Union, social control means state control. Napoleon Bonaparte was an emperor with complete control over a state. There was no democratic
but he
element.
still simped hardcore for the capitalists.
Wait, hold on. Laissez-faire capitalism was not at that time developed.
Okay,
And by the
so
way, there were. Wait,
you can cut me
please.
off. So let me get this straight. So you can cut me off, but I can never finish my points.
Well, you know what? After this one, you get a free cut me off point. Okay, I'll give that one to you. It's like a little token, but that's capitalism. We gotta lean over to my side if you want to take that bet. Look, the problem is if you say social ownership of the means of production, which is a huge cop-out, social ownership implies that there's some sort of collective...
How is it a cop-out?
I'm trying to say that. Some sort of collective decision that a given entity manages the means of production. But if that's the case, any autocrat could be said to be that leader. Hitler was widely loved by his population, and he had, at the end of the day...
No, he wasn't. His popularity dropped after World War II. His
he was dead after World War II.
Cliff.
Wait, hold on.
His approval rating fell off a cliff after World War II.
He was dead after World War II.
No, like from 40 to 45, like his approval rating fell off a cliff. Also, aren't you like one of the first people to say that approval ratings don't matter?
Yes, so that's the point that I'm trying to make. Now, let me finish it, please. So, if you don't need democracy for socialism, how do you ever ensure that the means of production are socially controlled? Do you just mean whatever leader controls it? How do you determine that it's socially controlled if it's controlled by the state and the state isn't a democracy? By the way, even if we're to grant this position, I would never accept a non-democratic state under any circumstances.
Well,
even if
neither would I, and you're mischaracterizing me if you think that. I'm saying that it emerged undemocratically due to it is a byproduct of their conditions, that it was a necessary compromise in order to keep the regime going, so that hopefully someday we can turn this around and make it right. All right, and that because it fell apart was because of a general lack of democracy. But in general, in the way that the Soviet Union was socialist, it was in the sense that profitability, money, and markets took the back seat when it came to economic decision making. An example of this would be like, say, the space race or the Ural Seas. They were draining the Ural Sea to provide water for their cotton exports. However, what they did was they ran a multi-kilometer long pipe from the Caspian Sea to make sure that the Ural Sea would stay alive. And they didn't need to do this. This costs literal billions of rubles in order to do. And not only that, but they subsidized the arts, they subsidized movies, they subsidized the film industry.
So you're making Nazi tier arguments right now. So let's back up a couple of tiers.
Why do you have to conflate me with Nazis, dude? Why do you have to try and like deliberately piss me off?
Please don't sound like Mel. Oh God, please don't do the Mel thing. Please understand how comparisons work. Okay. So why were the Pharaohs then not socialists? So what the Pharaohs did was they subsidized the arts, they were beloved by their people, they were non-capitalist, they had social control of the means of production because the material circumstances of their time prevented democracy from being able to develop organically, and they would utilize the economic resources of their society towards great works programs. So how were the Pharaohs not socialist?
All right, so now we're talking about slave economies. In general...
Wait, you know that there were gulags in the Soviet Union, right? Also, you said democracy wasn't...
Until Khrushchev. Khrushchev abolished the gulags. The penal labor system was done away under his tenure.
That's great comfort.
And by the way, it was a vestige of the czars. The gulag system existed under the czars for literal centuries. And yeah, conditions got better.
It wasn't their fault.
Stalin's
it was the czars. Come on.
Well, no, like, dude, you have to understand that nations are going to be stamped with the birthmarks of their old ways.
Oh, damn. Well, then America never really had slavery. We were just stamped with the birthmark of British colonialism that Americans tried to fight off for 200 years before we finally succeeded. I'm just making your arguments at you, but you don't like them when they're against you.
Why are you like willingly misunderstanding and misinterpreting what I'm trying to say?
So the problem is, and this is going to be the entire convo if this keeps up, it's not that I misunderstand your arguments, it's that you don't actually have a cohesive ethical framework for what it is you believe. So when I repeat your arguments back at you, but using figures, people, and countries you don't like, it makes you angry. You think I'm misunderstanding and misrepresenting you, but in reality, all I'm doing is showing how
I'm not angry.
Frivolous your arguments are. So
I'm not angry, and if you gave me the time, I could explain the different conditions and economic relations, but it's irrelevant anyways. I want to get back to my main central point. I want to rein things in a little bit and talk about the sense that the USSR was socialist. It was in the sense of social surplus. In other words, the way that surplus was extracted and utilized. Within capitalist economic relations, social surplus is hidden through the contract of wage, labor, and capital. So it's extracted through surplus value. But within socialism, or within existing socialism, wage labor is abolished, and social surplus is extracted and utilized through political decisions rather than just according to what's profitable. You can assert all you want the Soviets were capitalist. However, if they were capitalists, they were some of the worst capitalists like ever. There are a number of political decisions that they made that they did not have to make. And I would like to say that you are doing a great disservice to the proletarian cause by constantly comparing the Soviets and communists to Nazis, considering
I don't compare communists to Nazis. I only compare the Soviets to it. You're not. You're a Soviet, or you're a Soviet defender. The thing that I want to do is distance me and communism. Hold on. I want to distance socialism as much as possible from you lunatics. So the more I do to publicly indicate how horrible you all are, the more I do for the proletariat. So just so you know, in the Soviet Union, workers were paid wages. They worked quotas that were given to them by party officials, unelected party officials. They were paid. You
don't know what wage labor is. They were elected. They were elected by these.
They were elected by other party officials. So
they were elected by councils. It was
by councils of party officials. Non-party officials did not vote on who became a party official. I know more about this than you do. So
no,
Soviet workers were paid.
There was council democracy, so all the workplaces were consolidated within Soviets. So
we can't have this conversation if you're not educated enough on the Soviet Union to even understand how their economy worked. The Soviet worker had a wage. Wait, hold on. The Soviet worker worked for wages. They were paid more the closer they came to their quota. The quota.
You don't know what wage labor is.
Hold on. The quota was assigned to them by unelected state bureaucrats. Now, the reason why they were paid those wages, I'm going to run this through. This is Marxian Economics 101, is they were paid those wages from the state. But the state did not pay them the total worth of their labor. Because if they did, the state would have no comparative value to derive from the quota that they had fulfilled.
Read Gotha.
So, in other words,
Marx refutes this.
Hold on.
Marx refutes this in Gotha.
The Soviet. Wait. You have to let me finish before you get mad.
You don't let me finish. You don't let me finish the sentence. So
the Soviet
I'm not
Union
letting you finish. I didn't start interrupting you until you started interrupting me.
Are you really this mad already? We're like 15 minutes in. We haven't even gotten to a fraction of the topics available. Come on. So.
Well,
the Soviet Union,
I'd like it if you, just 1 second.
We're not actually going to get through this, are we?
I would like to just establish this. I would appreciate it if you treated me with the same level of respect that I have treated you with thus far. I did not start interrupting you until you started interrupting me, sir.
I'm not a big fan of liberal... I'm not a big fan of liberal civility politics.
I mean, you're the one who started insulting me.
Okay,
like,
so
just to try and get an emotional response
from my perspective, I want you to understand my material conditions.
Out of me to make me look bad. That's exactly what you're doing right now.
We need to be able to talk, or we can't do this, okay? The reason why I'm being rude to you is because, as far as I'm concerned, you're a pestilence on my movement. You're a group of state-worshipping autocrats who completely misunderstand what socialism is and don't understand the society. Wait, you actually have to stop. You actually have to stop interrupting.
Since when is it your movement? I thought it was our movement, Vaush.
Please.
Since when is it your movement?
Please. You need
just
to
trying
stop
to build
being
an
this
audience
mad.
or a movement?
Please.
You're trying to build an audience or a movement, Vaush?
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
Okay. So the problem that I have is that from my perspective, you people, and by you people I mean tankies, are nothing but counterproductive, and you harm our ability to advance the working class interests of the proletarian around the world. So from my perspective, I'm just speaking with a fascist of a different aesthetic. So I just debated 2 Nazis in a row, and now I'm debating you, and they all feel very similar to me, because all of you are autocrats, and none of you know what the fuck you're talking about.
Is that the best? When did I say that I'm in favor of autocracy? You don't know what I'm in favor of, bro. You haven't even asked me.
Okay. So anyway, I don't know if chat remembers you saying you don't necessarily think democracy is necessary for socialism.
Well, I don't, but that doesn't mean I don't want it. I would
You keep
ideally.
defending why the Soviet Union was autocratic, and then you were like, they had
I'm,
gulags because of the Tsar, like, for 50
explaining why
years.
it is. Because autocracies don't emerge out of bad ideas; they are a byproduct of conditions. And for one who
You're
claims to be a
misunderstanding
materialist,
dialectic materialism there.
You're for one who proclaims to be a materialist. You sure do love to rule out the conditions which led
No,
the
it's
Soviets
that you don't
to becoming that
understand.
way in
So
the
just
first
because
place.
material conditions lead to a thing doesn't mean you have to condone that thing, support it, or defend it.
When did I say I condone it, Vaush?
Wait, do you condemn the Soviet Union?
I don't condemn it, but I don't condone it. I want to
Oh,
understand
wait, so this wasn't you defending the
wanna-
Soviet Union for the past 15 minutes? Wait,
Yeah,
chat, I'm confused. It felt like they were defending the Soviet Union. Was I wrong in that? I'm willing to accept... Now, they never specifically said they condone it, but it felt like they were defending the Soviet Union to me. Which kind of felt like...
Hold on. Why don't we start from a position where we're not defending or denouncing?
No, you brought up the USSR. I just want to talk about ideas, but people, they always get into the... And then we have to... Then I realize every time that nobody who defends the USSR even knows what took place there, so I have to educate them. And yeah, wage labor was a thing in the Soviet Union.
I know it took place, and you do a massive disservice to the cause when you regurgitate and reaffirm bourgeois propaganda. Like, don't you ever
no,
think,
we're doing it again.
Ask you something.
Oh, like the Nazis, the Jewish propaganda.
Slow down, dude. Slow down, bro. Okay, so...
Wait, what did I say that was bourgeois propaganda? Wait, you have to tell me. What did I say that was bourgeois propaganda?
All right, so...
Wait, what did I say? Oh, no, you're exactly like them! The 3 Nazi debates in a row!
You want to compare me to Nazis? Guys, watch what he's doing right here. He has to compare me to fascists. He has to conflate me with fascism.
What did I say that was bourgeois propaganda?
He has to de-radicalize you guys from the hard left. He has to keep people from developing revolutionary consciousness.
What did I say?
Which is the reason why he's constantly sitting here trying to get me angry, dude.
What did I say that was bourgeois propaganda?
Well, he's sitting here trying to get me angry and get me emotionally riled up so that he can basically make me look insane and make me look crazy so that he can discredit socialism in practice and planned economy.
So wait, and what did I say that was bourgeois propaganda?
Well, it's propaganda. I mean, even if
a specific claim that I made.
That they're like totalitarian, autocratic states. Wait,
you don't think Stalin was an autocrat?
Soviet Union wasn't just Stalin.
Stalin was let's be real. Stalin was the person.
That simple. It is a complex, nuanced history, including many people. Okay.
Did the Holocaust happen? Yes, no. It's complicated, you know. It's a very nuanced history.
Yeah, the Holocaust. Yeah, it happened. But here's what's happening now. Every life support system is in decline. We suffer business cycles that ruin countless innocent lives every year. And the one thing that would alleviate these things and give people a respectable way of living is planned economy.
Hey guys, don't ever look up planned economies. They fail every time. If you ever want to see if you ever want to see a history of failure, look at economic crises in the Soviet Union. Planned economies are laughably bad at meeting the needs of their people.
Can I show you a chart that completely refutes that?
Can I look at it while playing Bloodborne? What's the chart? Just give me the info, I'll trust you, okay?
All right, so anyways, what we're seeing right here...
wait, actually do link it. Hold on. Wait, I can't let you do that. Link the chart.
All right, so it's not to a specific website, so I'm just going to go ahead and post it in the Discord. But basically, it's a chart showing economic growth between different sections of the world. What you see here is you see the sharp downturns in both the capitalist, like America, and the Western European countries. But if you look at the orange line, Eastern Europe, you'll see that growth flattens over the 20s, and then it linearly shoots back up. And they massively close the gap between the Western countries within a relatively short period of time. But then your market socialist reforms are implemented under Gorbachev. Growth slows to a snail's crawl.
Did not implement market socialist reform.
Yes, he did. What do you think perestroika is? Perestroika effectively brought back private property.
That's not market socialist reforms. Wait, do you know what I care about? Do you even know what I advocate for?
Well, you advocate for a kind of petty bourgeois socialism.
Hold on. I can already see a couple of problems in this chart. Here we go. So first of all, this is a very simplistic. I would really like to take a look at the source. Notice, by the way,
It's
chat,
just
this
PDP per capita,
right.
and
So
you can find the source at the bottom.
notice, by the way, that the lateral axis right here grows exponentially. So it's 500, 1,000, 2,500, 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000. So the closer you get to the top of the graph, the line that you see should fall off logarithmically. You've seen Western offshoots in Western Europe skyrocket up to a massive extent. And then over here we have, I don't know, did you write these circles yourself?
No, this is a chart that I got from Bunker Chan, admittedly. I do like to browse Bunker Chan.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
or
we have
Lefty Pole from
East
time to
Asia,
time.
right, okay. So we have East Asia over here, and what are we looking at? This would have been in the 1940s. Western offshoots. Who could have guessed that the West's GDP would go down during World War II? Western Europe drops as well. Eastern Europe flat lines right here at 2,500, meaning they were at around a quarter of what Western Europe was before.
But we're getting away from the original claim, aren't we?
Right, then afterwards we shoot up.
The original claim is they experienced business cycles, but you just see linear economic growth right here.
Well, the difference is because wait, hold on. The
recession that you see,
their
the
economy.
only recession you see is when capitalism's restored. Bro.
So their economic crashes didn't affect their GDP as much because they're not a capitalist economy. The economic downturns don't reflect as much on the overall economic productivity of the state. It's just the people that suffer. So then over here you have Western Asia.
Is GDP per capita. You see sharp spikes down right here.
Did you understand what I just said? I'll explain it again, but let me finish taking a look at this. So then we have Western Asia over here, and they get its lowest in the late 90s, but then it goes up. Vietnam's economy skyrocketed after they implemented market reforms, so that's probably a huge component of that. And then you have Eastern Europe over here, which fell after the fall of the Soviet Union because they were satellite states whose economies were barely holding on, and then their economy picked back up again within a couple of years thanks to reforms. I don't know if that's exactly a slam dunk on my argument against planned economies. If you really want, I can do a research stream on planned economies because they're like objectively non-functional. You know, they just don't work that well.
Just to let you know, Vaush, the existence of Amazon and Walmart are golden examples of planned economies in practice.
That is not what a planned economy. Oh no, you don't know what a planned economy is.
Internally, an internally like massive transnational corporations plan their inputs, their outputs.
How do they plan
it? Well, they plan according to profitability towards the minority.
How does Amazon decide we should produce this many X? How do they decide that?
Okay, well now we're getting into
a refutation. No.
We're getting into what the cost of production is.
No, we're not.
Anything at this point.
Market
and by the
economy.
way, this is deviating away. The original claim you made was that the Soviets experienced recessions, and the chart that I just posted directly refutes that, by the way.
So it doesn't for reasons I explained, but I'm not sure you heard. I'll explain it again shortly. But just so you know, a planned economy is one in which economic decisions are made top-down. Amazon and Walmart don't do that. They make their big planning and production decisions based on tens of... Wait,
Amazon,
stop.
Amazon and Walmart aren't top-down planned institutions.
No, hold on. Just because they're organized top-down doesn't mean they're not market-based. The reason they buy and produce things is because they're responding to tens of thousands of tiny market incentives down at the ground level. It may be organized top-down, but the economic decision-making is made based on information that comes from the bottom up.
Did you know that the market never went away in the USSR? There was still a market. It just had no bearing on economic decision-making.
Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, no, you brought up the argument that these institutions are just responding to market pressures. In other words, towards basically private enrichment or whatever turns the most profit. These institutions routinely throw out surplus stock during crises as well as overproduction.
You didn't understand what I said. I'll repeat it.
I'm going somewhere with this.
So a planned economy is when economic decisions are made from planning at the top, but in Walmart and Amazon, they're made based on tens of thousands of market decisions that come from the bottom up. They adjust the decisions and the distributions that they engage in based on micro-level decisions at the ground. So that would be a market economy. They don't like just have an autocrat at the top.
Do you know what a market is? What is a market, Vaush?
I need you. So can you respond to my point, please?
I need you to
What's
answer.
What's a TIF?
What if I just need you to answer a question for me? It's part of a broader point. I'll get to it. I just need you to answer my question.
You can answer the question for yourself. So far, you haven't known a single thing that we've talked about. Bosh? So if I tell you, I feel like I'm giving you the
can
answer.
You can assert that as much as you'd like, but I, in order for me to respond to your point, I need you to answer a rhetorical question. What is a market, Bosh?
You don't need me to answer a rhetorical question.
Yes,
we can wait here all you want. I'm happy to give you the time to catch your breath.
I don't understand why you can't engage in a simple
because you just ignored the argument because you know you were
wrong. It's part of the argument.
Oh, then
you were saying that they respond to tiny economic measures from the bottom to the top, and I'd like to explain how you could do that within the context of planned economy. But if
you want me to like Google planned economy and we can work off that,
why do we need to? Okay, so
because if you're wrong on something,
you're not going to do deep research. You're just going to dig up the first thing you find on Google about
no, the
planned
problem is I do
understand
this more than you, but you don't know, so you don't even know enough to recognize the difference in our understanding of this issue.
So you don't know what a market or commodities are.
So here, let's describe a difference.
You don't know what markets and commodities are.
A command economy, which is what
you don't know what markets and commodities are. This is your genius galaxy brain debate, bro. Can't even answer a simple question.
Just so you guys know, when I got an email from this person who I'm talking to, they said it would be different than the Mel debate. They said like, no, I know my shit. I don't know why I keep doing this.
I do know my shit. You're just not giving me the benefit of the doubt because you're trying to paint me as insane in front of your audience.
All I've done is try to talk about these issues with you. You've done all the legwork on that, okay? Don't beat yourself up.
I'm just trying to ask you a question.
So
what is a market?
Let's just Google it and we can figure it out there. Now, a command economy is an economy in which production, investment, prices, and incomes are determined centrally by a government. So if we're to analogize that in relationship to Walmart or Amazon, production is not determined centrally by like the CEO or the board of investors. Investment, that's not really applicable here because, you know, we're not talking investment. As for prices, that's not determined centrally either. Jeff Bezos wasn't single-handedly determining the price of every item to come out of Amazon.
Prices, well, hold on. Let's get into a little bit of Marxism here. Prices are an abstraction away from value, and value is determined by...
Oh my god, you made a bad analogy. Can we just move past it?
Can we just engage a little bit? I keep trying to engage with these topics. No, like I'm asking you a question as to what a market is, and for some reason you can't just answer it. Like, I don't know why it's so hard for you to answer this question.
Because I can feel the seconds of my life draining away, and we both know I know what a market is, and I really think at this point, since you're clearly buying for time, you probably should have just Googled it.
Answer it, dude. Why do you have to try to dance around it? Just answer what a market is. What's a market, Vaush?
I don't know. What is a market?
A market is a place where commodities are...
Wait, I could have just asked you? Wait, I asked you before. What changed?
It was a hypothetical question this whole time, Vaush.
No, you already said that, and we've been dancing around, but that doesn't... So wait, what does this have to do with the Walmart Amazon thing?
Oh my god, he's so fucking stupid. He doesn't even know what commodities or markets are.
Ooh.
You're a fucking idiot, dude. I hope you enjoy the grift while you can, because this isn't going to last forever. You're going to be selling pencils from a cup in like the next 5 to 10 years.
Like I was saying, man, I didn't need to put any work in to make you sound fucking crazy. All it takes is a little gravity. Wait, no, was that a Joker reference? Crazy. Pencils? Because in The Dark Knight, he did the pencil trick? Want to make a pencil disappear? Were you doing 2 Joker references in a row, the laugh and then the pencil?
No, I'm laughing because you don't know basic Marxist economics, and you pretend like you do.
I'm laughing because you're different. You're laughing because we're all the same.
You're a grifter. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You would have answered my question if you knew how to answer it, but you couldn't. You don't even know what Do you know what commodities are? What's a commodity, Vaush? So hey, what's value?
The emotional state that you're in right now is a product of something. It's probably insecurity. Do you want to talk about that? Because the way you're acting right now, I never act this way when talking to people.
Armchair psychology, dude. Man, I thought I was going to be stressed out and angry, but you are the most entertaining human being I've ever talked to in my life.
Some extraordinary coat posting. So the way you're feeling right now...
Keep projecting, asshole.
The way you're feeling right now is It's a way I've felt before too, though I don't act on it the way you do. And it's usually the feeling I get when I come underprepared to a discussion. So in the future, if you'd like to have this conversation again, maybe we can. But at this moment, I really don't think you're any different, like, at all from the worst.
I would be more than happy to come on at any time, Vaush. This has been very fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you.
Just, can I ask a sincere question? How old are you?
26.
Okay.
Same age as you.
Because it feels like a switch went off in your brain, and you're trying to sound crazy now.
The only difference between you and me is I didn't have mommy and daddy's money to get me through college, and I didn't grow up in Beverly Hills. I'm actually from a working class background, unlike your petty bouge ass.
Damn, that's crazy. Was there a
You have soft hands, Vaush.
Do you want to, just while we're rounding off the lunatic bingo, do you want to, like, call me a Jew before you go, or?
No. Why would I want to call you that?
I just had 2 debates with Nazis. I'm feeling some parallels.
Your mind state is that of a pathological bourgeois liberal socialist. That's what you are.
How you pronounce that word. Have you just read it before, like on Lefty Poll, so you don't know how it's pronounced? Am I the first convo you've had with a real socialist?
There's like multiple ways of pronouncing that word, but irrespective, want to talk about market socialism, Vaush?
Wait, you don't, but you've already flipped the crazy switch. What's there to talk about? Wait, actually, I'll give you a shot at redemption. What is my economic position? What do I want? Like, give I don't know, like a 60-second summary of my basic plan. I'm a big public figure. You should know.
I have a general idea. I'm assuming you want the system as is now, except with cooperatives and social democratic reform. So instead of all the firms being privately owned by executives and shareholders, they are jointly owned by the workers. And you still have a market, you still have money, you still have generalized commodity production. It's just capitalism with co-ops.
Okay, so that's step 1, though capitalism with co-ops is a little bit oxymoronic, considering private property ownership is the central tenet of capitalism. But then what do I want to do after that?
It's also a tenet of feudalism and slave societies. So if we just went off private ownership, we could define feudal and slave economies as capitalist as well, which is the reason why we make the distinction with generalized commodity production.
Exactly. Well, the distinction actually would be, see, again, you're misunderstanding Marx again. The distinction would be in part commodity production. It would also be in part who controls the means of production. So a market socialist society would be the first society in human history, certainly the first state, where workers controlled the means of production. Workers controlling the means of production would make it... Hold on.
What about Yugoslavia?
Yugoslavia
had a co-op economy.
Yugoslavia did a lot of really good stuff in that respect, but it wasn't perfect. It wasn't total. It would be an improvement upon some...
up by IMF loans, and it immediately collapsed the second the Soviets were no longer a threat to U.S. hegemony.
I don't know what this has to do with what I'm talking about, but okay.
Well, you don't know. You don't seem to know much of anything, do you, Vaush?
No, I don't really talk about Yugoslavia because I think my economic positions work as is, and I don't need to make any weird historical, analogies. So, because the workers would control the means of production, my state, the one that I want to build in the short term, would be the first workers' state or proletarian state. With selective decommodification, it would meet the description of a dictatorship of the proletariat, the first society in all of human existence to have ever met those descriptions. That's the baseline that I want to develop. And then after that, now that we control the economy, we being the proletariat, though I guess as a streamer I'm very tentatively in that group, we would then go forward and selectively decommodify, and we would achieve the basic tenets of what would then be a lower stage communist state. So my end goal is basically what you claim your end goal is, except better. I actually want communism, not whatever the fuck the Soviet Union did.
You know better than Marx then, because Marx was in favor of a planned economy. Now, what I will say is that
I'm sorry. Marx, hold on. Marx, first of all, I don't read text the way I do the Bible.
Well,
if Marx believed a thing, but modern data proves it to be incorrect, then I will believe the data. Marx was a very smart guy with a lot of great ideas, but at the end of the day, he was only human. He was also an anti-Semite, rather racist. I don't think any of us would disagree that those are elements of his personality we don't deify today.
Why don't planned economies work, Vaush?
I want to explain that to you, but it would take time, and we were talking about market socialism.
Briefly summarize it, because this is in relation to the broader point, markets versus planned economy.
So your argument is going to be in favor of a planned economy in general.
Yeah, I'm in favor of a general planned economy. Of course, you can't get rid of markets overnight. There's something that kind of prop up whenever you have holes in economic planning, hence the existence of black markets in the USSR. But I do believe within the context of modern cybernetics, computers, and IT, and the information age, you could plan an economy easier than ever before.
Well,
in fact,
how would AI help with that?
Well, you would just, well, how exactly would you like me to answer this question? Like, how help with what? Determining economic inputs.
Because
I mean, there's harmony theory. There's calculations that you could do based on the socially necessary labor time to produce whatever goods, as well as marginal analysis to tweak according to supply and demand. The Soviets didn't, of course, calculate price this way. But I would like a society where we do, where it's all based on labor notes and labor credits, and everything's planned.
I think that'd be preferable, because the problem with currency as is that it can be used to reify capital, that people can use it to invest and reinvigorate the capitalist mode of production. Whereas, of course, through labor vouchers, that's not the case.
Yeah, so you're in favor of a voucher economy. Do you know that vouchers
in the long term
do you know that vouchers do not circulate?
Well, yeah, that would be the point, right? They would be unique to the individual.
They don't circulate, they expire after a certain point, and they're assigned to specific individuals with accordance to their labor. Now, market socialism could be useful as a necessary step towards fully planned economy, as you use it as kind of like this buffer zone towards a planned economy. However, if you just stay market socialist for decades and decades to come, the long-term consequence of this will be the inevitable consolidation of wealth, the propensity for co-ops to exploit other co-ops via outsourcing and via rents, dividends, and so on, and finding other ways to...
Okay, so we've got a couple of points here. Hold on. So with regards to market socialism, the goal would not be to have it maintained permanently. The goal would be to use it as a transition state, as I said. There are reasons why I think it's a necessary transition point. Additionally, while it is always possible that a market socialist society could backslide, I think it's possible to legislatively prop it up in a fairly convincing way. The funny thing to me is that I think that market socialism is actually a fairly stable form of society that you can use as a jumping off point, but you defend like the Soviet Union, which never worked as a bridge to any of the larger ideas it claimed to be an advocate for. So while I agree there's always the threat of...
Well, the reason why I talk about the Soviet Union was, for all intents and purposes, the first attempt at a fully planned economy and a first rough shot.
Well, planned economies have been around for millennia. That's not new.
Yeah, but it's part of socialism. Planned economy plus societal ownership of the means of production. There's other components as well, but what I would like to say is you have a nation that at the start of the century was literally semi-feudal. It was a backward, semi-feudal, agrarian peasant backwater that became an industrial superpower and saved the world from fascist terror.
We're doing it again. Wait, first of all, let's not talk about the Soviet Axis talks. I'm talking about saving the world. Those fuckers nearly joined them and did for a while too.
Bullshit. Bull fucking shit. Like, hold on a second. Now you actually did say something that made me angry.
So now you've... Let's talk about I wasn't going to go sicko mode. But now okay.
So let's talk about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
We're not talking about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. I didn't say that.
Well, yeah, we are, because you said that the Soviets almost joined the Nazis.
No, I said I said the Soviet Axis talks. Do you know about those? Or are you being defensive because you only know of one of the two talks that they had?
Irrespective, there was a point where Soviet ambassadors were basically, I would have to, this is why I wish I dug up the resources, but basically there was Soviet ambassadors went over to Britain and France and agreed to do a joint attack on Nazi Germany, a preemptive strike where they would lend millions of troops worth of support because they saw the Germans were rearmed. And the whole point of the 1930s, from the purges and the rapid industrialization and so on, was because they knew the Western powers were coming to crush them. And on top of that, Stalin himself said in the late 20s that the Western powers had 100 years to modernize. We have like 10.
I notice we're engaging in a lot of apologism for trying to ally with the Nazis. So let me see if you're familiar with this. Okay.
I'm explaining that, like, what makes you think Stalin trusted the Nazis? He didn't trust anyone.
Wait,
including himself.
no head of state trusts any other head of state. All I'm stating is the factual point which the Soviet Union attempted to become the fourth Axis power under Stalin, and the only reason they didn't was because Stalin wanted Bulgaria, and Hitler was not willing to give him Bulgaria. That was the reason why. So it was only because Stalin was too greedy that Hitler did not allow him to be the fourth Axis power. And thank God for that, too. Stalin's greed prevented us from losing the Second World War. I'm pretty sure if it had been the four of them.
So, okay,
you want me to read it out loud to you? Wait, hold on.
No, you don't need to read it.
This is interesting. You didn't know about this. That's okay. The negotiations which occurred...
I found about 50 that you don't.
So, anyway, this is interesting. The negotiations, which occurred during the era of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, included a 2-day conference in Berlin between Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov and Adolf Hitler and German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop. The talks were followed by both countries trading written proposed agreements. After 2 days of negotiations, Germany presented the Soviets with a draft-written Axis Pact agreement that defined the world spheres of influence of the 4 proposed Axis powers, which were, of course, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the Soviet Union. Hitler, Ribbentrop, and Molotov tried to set German and Soviet spheres of influence. Hitler encouraged Molotov to look south to Iran and eventually India to preserve German access to Finland's resources and remove Soviet influence in the Balkans. Molotov remained firm and sought to remove German troops from Finland and gain a warm water port in the Baltic. Soviet foreign policy calculations were predicted by the idea that the war would be a long-term struggle, so German claims that the UK would be defeated swiftly were treated with skepticism. Wait, we're almost at the good part. We're almost at the good.
You're reading from Wikipedia, dude.
So
like,
again,
straight up.
Right. So
you're a Wikipedia scholar. You're not going to send me actual references. You're going to send me Wikipedia. Like, are you like a college graduate who, like, you should know of all people that Wikipedia is one of the worst places.
Are you a college graduate?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, then wait, hold on. What subject?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, my field, because it was part of the humanities. Hold on, my field because it was the humanities. I actually had to learn a lot of stuff about the ways in which people cite their research. And what I found is that usually when people get super salty about Wikipedia, it's not because they actually take issue with the information. It's because they didn't know it or because they just don't like that info. I know this because I argue with a lot of, you guessed it, Nazis. And if you look up any Wikipedia articles on basic components of World War II or of Nazi ideology, they'll say, Wikipedia scholar. Now, of course, if I wanted to, I could sit an idiot like you down and I could look through all of these specific cited links at the bottom. I'll mute you until I'm finished. So if you want, I could actually like go through all these citations at the end and I could point out like how all this puts together. But Wikipedia exists so people like you can understand complicated topics. Okay, I've unmuted you.
Oh yeah, the Wikipedia also quotes pro-Tsar sources and Robert Conquest, who are like known anti-communists. So if you don't believe that it's possible for there to be any sort of anti-communist bias on Wikipedia, I have a bridge to sell you. But and irrespective, let's rein things in a bit. So
well, wait. Anyway, hold on. Wait. My general rule these days is that I don't continue arguments when the person
talking about market social.
We can just let you finish, I guess.
Aren't you? You're a real slippery one, aren't you? We were talking about market socialism. Where this is the beauty of the no moderator free debate format is that you can slip and gish gallop.
If you believe that a moderator in this situation would be favorable towards you, you're delusional, my friend. Because anytime you get mad at me, which is very often, you're a very mad guy, you just talk and you talk and you talk.
Guys,
but as a general rule, I don't usually continue convos when we reach the point of the other person just denying evidence because it came from a source they didn't like. You might as well be calling Wikipedia Jewish controlled.
When did I deny evidence?
That's okay.
Also, you're making a fallacy of equivalence.
All right, there we go. Yeah, that went about as good as I expected. That guy was just as crazy as Mel. Wow, it's almost like Tankies are literally just Nazis. They just happen to align with a different group. My God. I think he was worse. He may have actually been worse. He was super, super mad. And it was so clear that he didn't know about the Soviet Axis talks. It was really clear he didn't actually know about it. So when I mentioned it and he actually got angry, and then he realized I was talking about a different thing, he was like, oh, and then he like did the Joker laugh. Oh my God. Wait, really quickly. Let me read the email that he sent out to me. Just a second. Here we go. This is the email that I got, okay? Hello, Vaush. You don't know me, but I know you. I want to come debate you, Vaush. There's a lot you get wrong about ML and socialism in practice. Your theoretical grounds are weak, and even worse, you seem to want to take every opportunity you can to demonize us and compare us to Nazis when nothing could be further from the truth. I would like to come challenge you in your market socialism, as well as your theory of social change, and contrast it with my own, and explain why planned economies are superior. If we tankies are just stupid LARPers, this should be an easy win for you, no? Because that was true. I tried to contact you a few nights ago, but you just banned me. I think he's referring to his ban from the Discord. I don't ban anyone in Discord. He probably got banned for, like, hold'em or denial in the Discord or something. So I've decided I'm going to directly address you instead. Apparently you wanted to debate Jason Unruh in the past, but I'll gladly step in and do it in his place. And then I responded, oh man, not another one. How will you be different from Mel? Give me variety. And then he said, what I will tell you about me is that I'm an established ML YouTuber, and I'm good friends with Jason Unruh. Since he apparently doesn't want to talk to you, and I do, in addition, I have the condolences and faith of my peers, a bunch of tanky LARPers, as you know, and I should perform well against you in a debate. I'm pretty well read on a number of historical subjects as well as theory, and personally, I think I'm a better debater than leftism today, another friend of mine whom you've spoken to some time ago. So if you're looking for a challenge, I think I could give you one. I'm not a China simp, and for two, I'm not a cult leader or a narcissistic sociopath. I don't have any serious mental illnesses. I work a full-time job, and he just talks about himself wrong. And I used to be an anarchist a few years ago, but I guess you could call me a tankie. That is, if your definition of tankie means being right. Whew. There we go. Man, it's actually really, really sad because I know that it's the same as fascies. I know that underneath the anger, there's a lot of hurt down there, but I don't know how to reach these people. Guys, was I unduly mean there? I feel like I unironically tried to engage with the ideas as best as I could, but his relentless, angry interruptions and the fact that he clearly didn't know anything that we were talking about. Like, he didn't actually... As a general rule, and I stand by this, if I'm having a conversation with a person and I'm reading out something that they don't like there's information that they don't like, and they're like, oh, it's Wikipedia? Ha! You Wikipedia scholar! Ha 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 ha! Like, once you're at that point, I don't know what to do. I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. Ha 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 ha! Oh, God.